If you've been contemplating a residential property purchase here in Vancouver, you might have heard that you would need to put down a minimum of 20% as a down payment. But is that really the case? Well, in today's video, we'll walk you through the minimum down payment requirements when purchasing a residential property here in Vancouver. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Before we talk percentages, let's briefly discuss the two types of mortgages that you have. The first type is a conventional mortgage, and that's when the borrower puts down a minimum of 20%. And the second type is a high ratio mortgage, and that's when the borrower puts down less than 20%. Now, the biggest distinction between these two mortgages is that high ratio mortgages are only available to principal residence buyers, and these are buyers that are buying a piece of property to live in it as opposed to an investment condo or investment property. Since the minimum down payment requirements vary depending on the type of purchaser you are, let's walk you through two different scenarios. And let's say the first scenario is we've got a principal residence buyer that's buying a property to live in it. Now, in that case, the minimum down payment requirement would be 5% on the first $500,000 of the purchase price, and then 10% on any amount between $500,000 to $999,000, just under $1 million essentially. As soon as that purchase price reaches $1 million, then that minimum down payment requirement would be 20% across the board. This is in scenario one if it's a principal residence buyer. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we've got a principal residence buyer. They're buying a condo for $700,000. The bare minimum they would have to put down would be $25,000 on the first $500,000, which is 5%, and then 10% on the additional $200,000 over the $500,000. So that would be $20,000 plus a $25,000, a total of $45,000 as a bare minimum. Please note that depending on your situation, your lender could ask for a little bit more than the bare minimum down payment. Now, in scenario two, if we've got an investor that's looking to buy an investment property, now the minimum down payment would be 20% regardless of the purchase price. So whether an investor is buying a $600,000 condo or a $2 million property, you're still going to have to put down a minimum of 20%. Just to give you a brief example, let's say an investor is buying a $900,000 property, there would be a minimum of 20%, which comes up to $180,000. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is that generally speaking, and depending on your lender, now if the purchase price is more than $2 million or $2.5 million, the lender might be okay with 20% across the board up until a certain threshold, and they might maybe need you to put down anywhere between maybe 30 to 50% on that portion that's above the threshold. So it's important to check with your lender and be aware of the minimum requirement in that case. This brings us to the end of today's video. If you found it useful, feel free to give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Also, if you're contemplating a property purchase in 2024 and you'd like us to be engaged and walk you through the process, you can always book an initial consultation through the link in the description box below. Thanks, and we'll catch you in the next one.